That's a solid snake pose.
We need to decide which monstrosity will have the privilege of survival.
A lot of people have been asking for part 2. Well, not a lot of people. One person has been asking for part 2 of my epic Let's Play of Prison Architect. And I'll tell you what, I'll make a part 2 when it gets 10 likes. How does that sound? Good? Groovy. But I've been playing a lot of shitty indie games recently, and I thought I'd talk about why indie can be so much better than AAA. And then I'll make another video about why AAA games are so much better than indie titles. Got to even it out. We can't. I'll never get sponsored if I just only suck the dick of people who have a budget of about $20. And yes, you're absolutely right. I am doing that for the money. First, I want to talk about the goals of the 3 different groups. There are the consumers, the developers, and the publishers. The consumers want a fun game that they will get a lot of time out of for their money. So they want to spend as little as possible for the most experience possible. The developers want to try and appeal to the consumers, but also trying to put in as little work as possible. That's why we have things like Day 1 DLC, Gold, Platinum, Executive, Director's Cut editions, re-releases, remasters, paid mods, etc, etc. And the publishers are interested purely in the capital, and like keeping PR, good face to the public, that kind of thing. Like, they don't really care about the games because it's irrelevant. Like, it could be Barbie Simulator 2019 or Blood, Splat and Gore XX 3 million for all they care. If it sells and it doesn't make them look bad, like supporting this kind of thing, they will happily throw money at whatever is profitable. Now, the problem arises when the publishers are in charge of the development. Because the thing about publishers, they're good at selling games. They're good at funding games. But it's completely outside of their expertise as to what makes a game good, or what makes a game fun and enjoyable or immersive or whatever. So when you have a publisher breathing down the neck of a developer, telling them what they can and can't do, because, it might hinder their profits or whatever, you get, you get shit like this. Hey, I was reading a magazine and I heard these buzzwords. Add them to the game. You do know we're making a single-player RPG, right? Like, this would be completely... This wouldn't fit. Add them anyway. Why? Because we think it'll help drive profits, and if you don't do it, we'll cut your pay. Fine. I guarantee 99% of the time, all of the slightly newer games getting updated with Battle Royale modes, that's probably how that conversation went down. Okay, so that's the context to my first point, and my first point, is that indie games have the advantage of usually not needing a publisher. And when they do have a publisher, it's usually like, they usually publish it themselves, and if they don't, they usually use something like the Xbox Live Arcade or Steam or whatever. And the publisher just publishes, rather than has a hand in the development itself. And this is a benefit because it gives the developers much more creative control over their piece of work. And if you consider video games to be art, that is a good thing. Granted, it's not always a good thing, but in the grand scheme of things, the developers having creative control over their own pieces of work is ultimately for the best, in my opinion. And hopefully yours as well. Otherwise you'd be like a video game fascist. Or a technocrat, maybe? I don't know. Either way, you'd be supporting shitty industry practices. Point 2. In the recent trends in the industry, trying to get people to buy these big, massive, expensive games that are really long, like 60, 80, maybe even 100 plus hours of content for $60 with $20 expansion packs and reskins and DLC and microtransactions and all that. It's a very big, time-consuming way of spending your money. And yeah, it's a lot of time and a lot of money. With the AAA industry, at least. Let's take Fallout 1, for example. By our common modern definition of the term indie game, Fallout 1 would probably be considered an indie game. Like, it had a very small development team, like they barely got any funding, etc., etc. And you can finish Fallout 1, like, if you just skip all of the side quests and all of the optional content, you can finish Fallout 1 in about an hour. Whereas compared to Fallout 4, you know, the last Fallout game, the last actual Fallout game, the main story will take the average player about 32 hours to finish. And again, that's also not counting all of the side quests and stuff. So we're seeing this trend of, like, the further we go along, like, this timeline, like, the bigger budget, the longer, the more expensive games are getting. And this trend is hardly being hindered by complete shills like Extra Credits, who are advocating for shit like $80 price tags at launch, as if that'll change anything. Apart from less money in the consumer's pocket. Fuck off, Extra Credits. But this video isn't about me getting pissed off at Extra Credits, this is about indie games, so let's get back on topic. You didn't see that, but I just winked at the camera. But yeah, as AAA titles get bigger, more expensive, and longer, etc., etc., a lot of people just don't have the time to play them. So indie games are a nice respite for that, because they're usually much cheaper than AAA titles, they're usually a lot shorter, and I couldn't think of a third one, but the fact that they're cheaper and shorter is a good enough point on its own. Couldn't do the list of 3, as that's a very good literary device, but, you know, I'm not writing fiction. I'm spitting cold hard facts. Ben Shapiro style. So yeah, point 2 is they're usually a lot shorter, and along with a game being shorter, it means there's usually a lot more depth to it. How can I explain this? Oh, I know. If nobody would go and watch a 9-hour movie, but if you split that shit up into a TV show with 1 season and it has 9 episodes all an hour long, people would binge watch that. And it's the same with games. Like, if you stretch everything out to about 9 hours, it's not going to be as interesting as if it was all condensed into 1 hour. So these longer games normally have to have a lot more padding. And the padding normally isn't really that good. Like, if it was better, it'd be part of the main story, but since it's not, it's the padding. If that makes sense. A AAA game is like a TV series. It's very long, it's a lot more expensive than just buying a movie, and it's full of lots of different little bits of everything. You know what I mean? Like, there's a character here doing one thing, and his arc might last 3 seasons. There's a character that might die in the first episode, etc., etc. There's a lot more content, and it is somewhat, it does somewhat have more depth than the movie, but that, because it's so long, it's not really that noticeable. But with the movie, it's incredibly short compared to the TV show. It's a lot more dense, and it's a lot cheaper than buying a box set. I think that makes sense. If you have a better example, please tell me in the comments. My last and final point will take a little bit of explanation for the context beforehand. The thing about big budget AAA games is that there's a lot at stake. Like, development is really expensive, especially now. So 99 times out of 100, they will take the safer route. They will hop on trends, and they will do what everyone else is doing. Just, you know, as fail-safes in case the game doesn't sell as well as they think it will. But with indie games, that's a much smaller issue. Like, let's say a big budget AAA game has a $30 million budget, it tanks, and they only make $10 million back. That's a fucking disaster. They lost $20 million. But let's say an indie game that has a budget of, say, $30,000, and it only sells enough to make back 10k, like 20k, that's not a big deal. 20k is about half a year's worth of pay if you're working class, like middle class. Like, it's not as big as a massive financial failure as $20 million. Because with that $20 million, a lot of people are going to lose their jobs. But with an indie game, you've just lost 20k. Like, 20k is peanuts in the grand scheme of things. Like, especially if you are an indie developer by trade. And I just want to clarify that I'm not that big of a fan of indie titles. I prefer double A, as it were, where companies with a lot of money making games on their own, like Portal or Kingdom Come Deliverance or The Witcher 3, games like that, relatively high budget, but they have full creative control over what they're doing. And that might be a topic worthy of discussion later, but yeah, that's what I consider the benefits of indie gaming, which is more creative control to the developers, ideal for people with busy lives, and they can experiment as much as they want because the stakes are very low. Huge, enormous thanks to my my two top tier patrons, Stolen Dragoon and Ori Main. Can't thank you guys enough, and all of my other patrons, and everyone watching this video, all 56 of you. That's going to be really weird. Like, imagine you just getting high and you're the 56th viewer and you see that shit. That'd be fucking scary. I am all-knowing. I know who you are. Actually, I probably don't know who you are, but anyway, that doesn't matter. All that matters is if you believe I know who you are. And that's how parasocial relationships work. So, yeah. See you in the next... You'll see me in the next video. See you later. And yeah, tell me... I genuinely do want you to tell me what your favourite indie titles are. And if any of you say Undertale, you're going to get banned from commenting forever.